Now, during last night's election night coverage here on New Jersey, we spoke with Montclair State University President Dr. Jonathan Koppel about what a Sherill victory meant for the state of New Jersey.
We have Dr. Jonathan Koppel with us still from Montclair State University. And when you hear certain large media outlets already calling the race for Sherill, that would indicate what to you?
To me, it's a reflection of the turnout, interestingly enough, because when the numbers started coming in early that there was turnout, as you know, record-setting turnout, but it seemed to be tracking the partisan registration divide in the state, which, as you know, there's a Democratic registration advantage. And so if Republicans and Democrats are sort of voting in equal numbers at a high level, that's gonna indicate that the Democratic candidate is gonna do well. And it speaks to the nature of contemporary politics. Like, people think about politics as being persuading the undecided in the middle. And that's part of it. That's part of it. But at this moment in time, it's really as much about getting your own folks to be excited and head out to the polls. And so I think both campaigns were really focused on that, and I think that's partially why we're seeing a result so quickly. Is that
right? Well,
that people were motivated to come out and support their candidate.
I believe it's more than 800,000 more Democrats than there are Republicans, and there's a huge number of unaffiliated voters as well, which both campaigns really go for that. And traditionally, Democrats do better with their get out the vote effort. More Republicans tend to turn out on election day to vote, whereas the Democrats are really churning it out in that early voting. But you don't know until they start to open the tallies.
The early voting, the Republican turnout in early voting was strong.
Well, it was stronger than it was last time around, but Democrats still, they far outnumbered Republicans.
My understanding is, and again, all these things will come into clearer focus in the days ahead. My understanding is actually the unaffiliated voters had less of a spike in voting than the registered Democrats and Republicans, which again, there'll be exit polling, there'll be analysis. But one of the interesting questions is in an election environment where you're really focused on motivating your base, right, and getting your people out to vote, does that turn off people in the middle who are saying, like, look, I'm not committed to one team or another. I don't like the way politics has become. It's possible. So it's interesting to see very high turnout in two groups that are affiliated, and maybe a slightly less accelerated turnout for the unaffiliated.
And then also just looking at the national picture as well, President Trump he exceeded expectations while New Jersey did still vote for Kamala Harris. He made a lot of inroads in places that were heavily Democratic before and picked up, certain groups of voters. So people were really thinking, wow, this bodes well for Jack Ciattarelli coming into this election cycle. But when it played well for a Republican coming into this cycle. But, when you had somebody like Jack Ciattarelli, who, at one point didn't support Trump, then did support him, kind of going back and forth, in the primary you had Bill Spadea, who was very much a big supporter of President Trump. Can you talk just a little bit about how, those national trends really factored in and how the Trump factor was such a factor?
Look, I think there's going to be a lot of discussion about how the Trump effect got onto this. What I'll say is this: I don't think it's possible to analyze this election without discussing how it fits into the national scene. I don't think we're not gonna figure this out in the next 5 minutes. But I don't think you can view the New Jersey election as being disconnected from national politics. I think everybody would agree on that.
Sometimes, or many times, I should say, in the past, what we've seen is people coming out in the off year and they vote for the person at the top of the ticket and they tend to ignore everything below. You just see the huge disparity in the number of votes cast. We haven't seen all the numbers. We see some of them coming in right now. We have every single state assembly seat up for grabs. There are 40 state assembly districts. 2 people per district to be voted for. It'll be interesting to see what the turnout is here, but do you think people understand how essential it is to vote for their representative, their state assembly, their state senate when there is a Senate year? This year we only have one person special election for the Senate. But do you think people grasp the importance of that and not just the top of the ticket?
Almost certainly not. So my academic background is in political science, so I'm happy to talk about this stuff. That the phenomenon you're talking about is generally called roll-off, right? When people vote at the top and then don't vote down ballot. I think people don't appreciate the significance of what we call down ballot elections. So the legislature, certainly true. Even more true is the local races, the school boards, the commissions. All of these positions, council. All of these positions have a huge impact on people's lives. And one of the things when we're cultivating sort of civic awareness is to say, hey, there's more to it than the presidential election or the congressional election or the gubernatorial election. Pay attention to what's happening in your town. And people say, well, my vote doesn't matter, my voice. Boy, in those elections, you're talking about votes in the hundreds sometimes, or thousands, where people do lose elections or win elections by 5, 10, 30 votes. And they make a huge difference in terms of what happens to your family and to your neighborhood. And it turns out that the people who are elected to the council, they end up in the state legislature and they end up running for governor, like Jack Ciattarelli. So I strongly encourage people to pay more attention to those things and get engaged, because that's when you get the feeling of efficacy, right? That your vote really changes public policy.
All right. All right, that was Dr. Jonathan Koppel last night. He is the president of Montclair State University. He was amazing. His analysis was just unbelievable. Great to have him on.